Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the town board meeting for October 26, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. As always, we are doing our meeting in a hybrid virtual situation. Our meeting happens not only in person, but on Zoom, streamed to Facebook, YouTube, and our website. Folks can find information to join our Zoom, to participate in our meetings right at the top of each of our agendas. And we will move on to Councilor Nicholson. Will you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, we have open podium. Open podium is an opportunity for residents to come and tell the board some feedback, ask questions, things like that. So do we have anybody sign up for open podium?
I don't know. I did not. If we have a sheet out there, I did not grab it.
Okay.
No one had pre-registered.
Okay, so just
Excuse me, I might have signed in the wrong form, but I did sign up for the
open podium. That's great. Thank you. Well, would you like to be our first person in open podium?
Okay, not sure how it works, but,
Yep, come right up to the podium.
okay.
And talk in the microphone.
Yeah, you're gonna be talking to the microphone basically. And then just if you can try to keep it to 3 or 4 minutes, that would be great.
Okay. Using this
Oh,
button.
no.
No,
these
they're, yeah, these little
Just
devices right here.
talk to that.
That makes it easy. My name is Tom Manlius. I live 7761 Rolling Ridge Drive in Manlius. And I don't know, somebody from my neighbor sent an email around. There was quite the scary accident right around, 3 doors down from our house. I have a 6-year-old grandson, we walk him around many times. He's learned to watch the cars. He said, man, I saw 26 cars run the road, 26 bad drivers, he calls them. And, people I know wrote in about a speed bump. But I think, we've got stop signs and everything, but they're really not patrolled there. Yeah, I never see a police car sitting maybe on a side street to control it. One day, we were walking them and somebody blew by a stopped school bus. And, I'm here really more for my grandkids than anyone, it's, I drive the car and it hurt. I don't know what happened with those people driving, I don't know what speeds anybody kept doing that happened, but to flip the car out of 20 mile an hour turn. I don't know what can be done, I wasn't here for the police meeting or whatever. But I know it's a concern for all of our neighbors.
Thank you. We did receive several emails about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Am I done for that?
Next up is Dan Silk.
Silky. Dan Silky, I live in the neighborhood as well, 7753 Rolling Ridge Drive. My son Henry is here with me as well. We are very concerned about the situation in the neighborhood. Just to add a little color, I didn't witness the accident, but I saw the car overturned. That turn is very tight, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen people go around quickly. We are out for walks quite often. We love the neighborhood. That's why we live there. One of the nicest things about the neighborhood beyond going is walks as a family is my son Henry, my younger son Wesley, they enjoy riding around the neighborhood. There's been a significant turnover, as my neighbors can attest to here in the neighborhood, with younger families with children. And it is one of the nice things about living in the community, that they can get out and ride their bikes. But it's been an ongoing issue. Incidentally, a bunch of us were in front of the planning board 6 months ago, maybe. And one of the issues I had raised at that time was the traffic related to an expansion of Poly Drive. I had said that the traffic was bad to begin with. The stop sign right in front of my house, people running constantly. I am not exaggerating. I've spoken with the police. They pulled over 12 people, and I know this because the officer came back the following day. He said, I pulled over 12 people, 7 or 8 of whom reside in Spruce Ridge South. And I know that's outside of the township, it's in Pompey. But frankly, I think that those people are cutting through our neighborhood and they're going excessively fast. It was unbelievably frightening that someone could flip a car in that situation. And my kids, they go down that road off on their bikes. Very concerning. So I'll close with this. I'm a big believer in not just complaining without offering some solutions. Possibly look at dropping the speed limit from 30, I believe it is, to at least 25. We do that in school zones. In school zones, aside from when students arrive and leave at the end of the day, for the most part, they are not busy along the road by it. They're much closer to the playgrounds. Our neighborhood's way busier than that because kids are on bikes and we don't have sidewalks. So dropping it to at least 25, better police presence, possibly putting up a no pass-through traffic. I thought with putting it up in our neighborhood, one of the nice things is we abut the town of Pompey area. So it's not as though we're going to be seeing town residents angry about the ones that would be Pompey, right? So that's a concern. So
We're friends with them.
yes, that's one way to look at it. And the last recommendation is escaping, but I just wanted to voice my concern and hopefully something.
Thank you.
All right, next up, Joe. Rusty.
Sorry, terrible. My name is Joe Rusty, me and my wife Hillary David, we're in 7787 Rolling Ridge, in the same neighborhood as the last two speakers. We live actually right at the bend, the 90-degree bend, where the accident occurred Sunday evening. We resided there for 3.5 years, and like other commenters, we observed people speeding, above the speed limit, well above safety. It's a blind turn, and therefore it's very scary. Our 3 kids who are 9, 7, and 5 are out in the neighborhood constantly on the bikes. There's no sidewalks, so there's really no other place to ride the bike safely. Daily, the kids are over at our home, playing, constantly driving their bikes back and forth for 10 months a year. The fact that, someone could have gotten hurt was just so horrifyingly scary on Sunday evening for all of us in the neighborhood, kids or without kids. And I know that there are neighborhoods within the area, the Kittel Road and DeWitt across from Wegmans does utilize speed bumps to slow down, cut through traffic, and that since by bypassing the light and able to drive across from Wegmans, they do seasonal speed bumps there. Again, I think one of the biggest problems are neighbors that are going to the next neighborhood just north of us in the town of Pompey to save a few minutes by not having to travel about a half mile further on Brickyard Falls Road. Anything that could help encourage drivers to be safe would be great. I think there's probably some limited utility signage, but anything that can be done would be heavily encouraged. We had a horrible experience last summer of having a Manlius police officer come to our home to say that my father-in-law passed away in a car accident in the town of Manlius. The officer also responded Sunday evening, and he was very nice. He came by to say hello, check out us. It was very nice, but just really brought back a lot of hard memories for us. And the fact that someone from the town of Manlius would have to come to our home or another neighbor's home to say any terrible news like that, it's terrifying. So appreciate the time that you guys are taking, and really hope you guys consider helping our. Thank you very much.
Sorry for your loss.
Next up is Hillary Damon.
That's actually.
Michelle Burgess.
Hi, my name is Michelle Burgess. I live at 4535 Hunter's Ridge Drive in the same neighborhood, same conversation. I did want to add or ask, we were here in December meeting with you regarding all these things that we were going to look into for the development. One of them was a traffic study, and we've never heard anything about it from you. So we haven't seen anything being analyzed in our neighborhood. We haven't seen strips. We haven't seen people sitting on a corner watching what happens. So as a citizen, I would like to know what has been done since then. I don't know if you can tell us now. I don't know if you need to email me separately, but I'd like to know what the plan is for that, because it has been addressed and you guys said you were going to look at it.
So one thing I will say is in the preliminary budget that we'll be accepting tonight, we do have money in there for traffic calming equipment. So primarily signage, but also those temporary speed bumps that can be moved. And as we were doing that today, we were seeing the emails come in. And so we know that that's probably one of the first places we would look to use those so that we can, they're really there those tools would be used to see if speed bumps do solve the problem, and if they do, then we can look at doing more permanent speed bumps. Or we can even see if just doing it seasonally, like I think you said over in DeWitt, if that'll just kind of break the habit of people doing that cut through. And so that, as soon as, when that budget is finally adopted, we'll be looking at getting that equipment for ideally probably next spring to be used in the neighborhood.
Did you all meet with the planning board?
We did, we were here.
With the planning, so not the town board, the planning board.
Correct, in
So
December.
that would be part of site plan review, and if the traffic study was done, we could certainly get it. We don't know exactly.
We'll find out.
This minute, but we can.
Okay.
That was for the Poly Drive project.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my only other question or point to point out is that the traffic flows speeding both ways.
Mhm.
So we can't just have one temporary speed bump to cover one section coming up. The speed comes the other way too.
Mhm.
Because it's a.
Well, a temporary would go across the road.
Yeah, I know it goes across the
But
street,
she's saying.
but I'm saying we would need.
So at the beginning
more
of
than
this road,
one.
that one
Yeah.
at the beginning of the road.
Yeah, factors in the neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know my north and south and east and west there, so that's where I got stumbled.
Well, we could put it in,
Because we only own like to
yeah,
the
we
corner.
could put it within the town,
But
basically.
we can coordinate.
And we can talk about.
Yeah, we had an internal conversation about coordinating with the supervisor on the town of Pompey today, so, I know that the supervisor there will be doing that.
And I know at the police committee meeting, they did address this, and I know the chief is gonna have something more for the next police committee meeting.
Okay, so please go online and make sure that you're aware of when that next, Allison, can we give everybody the date of the next police committee meeting?
Yes.
Does it follow the board
It's gonna be
meetings?
December, it's gonna be the second meeting in December. One second, and I can
Should be the.
tell you. The 21st, December 21st.
At 5 PM here, and we stream as well.
All right, thank you.
But I will follow up on the traffic study.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, last on my list is Karen Tarula.
Hi, I'm Karen Torella. I live in the same neighborhood, 4534 Poly Drive. So basically, just right down the road from the Silkies. I'm pretty much, I'm going to concur with everything that's been said, but I do want to add a different aspect that this accident has absolutely brought out the mama bear. Because I just got courage enough to let my children ride their bikes without me and go to their friend's house, the Rusties, and it took a lot for me to do that. But boy, after that accident, a car flipped in a 20-mile. I mean, my children were just there like 2 hours prior. So the fear that brings parents, I mean, you can obviously understand that, I'm sure. The other thing I just want to add is I did a quick research, and I know that your research is going to be more thorough. But based on trafficschoolonline.com, it said that speed bumps and pedestrian safety, that it was found that installing a speed bump and associated with a 53% to 60% reduction in injury or death in neighborhood children struck by a vehicle. And so I'm, like I said, I know you're going to do your research and probably find even better stats that support this.
That's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who'd like to come up to speak for open podium? Okay, anybody online? If you're online and you'd like to speak, please use the raise hand function. Okay, seeing no more comments for open podium. Ready to move on?
So thank you for coming. You're
Yeah.
welcome to stay if you want to, but it's going to be a 3-hour meeting. so-
She's just kidding. She's kidding.
Wow, that's pretty clear. Thank you for coming, Henry.
Come on now.
So we're gonna make a slight adjustment to the agenda. We're gonna start off with the Manoa fire contract public hearing. So I would just look for a motion to,
So a motion to waive the reading, public notice. Second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Open.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. So if you'd like to come up, we've got some slides here.
How's everybody?
Good, Mayor Purcell, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Have a slideshow up there. Just before we get started, I'd just like to say, it's been a trying year in our fire district with the ambulance service, the hospitals and everything that's going on in this county right now. We'll get into the numbers, but you know, the responses that all of us, I know Fayetteville and Manlius are in the same boat, but you know, we're in the city a lot. We're getting called into the city a lot. We're getting called into Sullivan County, or Sullivan, the town of Sullivan, the town of DeWitt. So we're going all over the same like Manlius and Fayetteville is. This is really a big problem, and it's getting worse. And the hospitals now are holding us up even longer before we can get back in service. If we go back in service while we're downtown, we'll never get out of downtown. We're the nearest ambulance. And, you know, they'll have us somewhere, wherever in the city, dealing with all the issues that the city of Syracuse faces. And that takes us out of our district, and that's a domino effect. Fayetteville's got to cover us, or Syracuse, you know, fees. You know, everyone's got to come in and keep covering people, so it's a big domino effect. But just so everyone's aware, we're doing our best. But the city right now in the county, AMR is the ambulance service, and there's no contract. So AMR is a business. They're in it to make money, and they could have any time pulled the plug because they have no contract with the city or the county. And if they decide, hey, we don't want to do this anymore, leave, we're real big trouble that AMR leaves. But these are problems that you know, we've met, myself and Mayor Worrell and Mayor Olson, along with Mayor of Syracuse, and talking about, you know, where we're going to go from here. The city of Syracuse owns one ambulance. In this town, we have 6. Manlius, Fayetteville, and ourselves each have 2. I know Fayetteville has 3, I think, but in service at one time, there's at least 5 probably in service at one time. And compare that to all of Onondaga County, and you know, the city of Syracuse has never been in business, in the ambulance business, so you know, they struggle with that. So just to put that out there so everyone's aware of what we're dealing with, and it hasn't gotten any better. So with that being said, you know, we have a new chief. I'd like to introduce Chief Don Griveldi of the Manoa Fire Department. He's our new paid part-time chief. You know, that's the direction we've been going in, and it's working out great. We're really on the right path, and you know, it's whenever you change something like that, you're going through growing pains, and we went through our share of pains. I'm sure a lot of people might have seen it in the media and everything else, but we had to go through that before it got better, and it's getting better. It's doing great. So we never were at a point where we weren't servicing this town, or our, you know, our fire protection district is 77% of the town of Manlius, and we were always there. We never had a problem where we couldn't respond or be on calls. And being an all-volunteer fire department, which we are, the only one in the town other than Kirkville, you know, you would think that's a big struggle because Fayetteville and Manlius have paid staff and volunteers, so that helps a lot with being out on the road. But we've never had a problem. We've never missed a beat. We made our calls, and we were able to respond and everything we needed to respond on. You know, I can't say enough for our volunteers. You know, I always say volunteer isn't the right word for what they do. The time they have to give, and to get qualified to be a tiered firefighter and everything else. A volunteer, I think of as like coaching Little League. And these guys, they're dedicated. And one time, a reporter asked me, "Would you rather, if your house was on fire, would you rather have a paid firefighter there or a volunteer?" I said, "Well, that." volunteers, it's state regulations. Our volunteers have to go through the same training as any paid fireman. Be able to fight fires. The state has a list of qualifications, and our guys are just as qualified. The only difference is the paid firefighters, that's their job, they're on it every day. Where our guys are on when they get called to service. So there's no difference as far as I'm concerned, and they do a heck of a job. We have done a heck of a job, and our chiefs really done a great job also. So that's enough of my soapbox. We can get to the slideshow. So it, that first slide is showing you the breakup between town share, which is, like I said, 77% town, village of Manila covers. So that is our fire protection district. Basically, we cover everything north of the canal, all Fremont, Erie Village, all the way out to Conway, right near Conway. Right where Sunnyside Nursing Home, if you're familiar with that, that's about where the line is. So we cover a large area, and then up in Kirkville, we split that with Fayetteville, Kirkville, that's their thing too. So that's the breakdown of our budget, our total budget, and towns percentages there. This year, our total budget is there's an increase of 2.7%. Trying to, we work hard to maintain the services that we do and keep costs down as best we can. This is different operating expenses, as you can see, that's all broken down. And comes up with the total amount. I don't know if there's any questions along the way, please.
Well, there was one question. I know when we had received the contract last year, there was, what was it, $200,000 for air tanks?
Yeah, for the air packs.
And we had a conversation about that being like a one-time expense.
Right.
And then with this budget, we still see, we saw a small increase from last year, but that still is with that $200,000 jump. And I understand there's a piece of equipment.
Yeah, I can explain that. If you look on, well, you guys all have the budget that's second, right? So, here under ambulance, what happened was we were going to budget next year for a new ambulance. And with the, the turnaround on trucks and everything else is out there, it's taking some cases years to get a pickup truck. It's an equipment because of the supply chain. So we were waiting to do that for an ambulance. We were told it's going to be a couple of years to even get it. And then all of a sudden, an ambulance became available. Someone canceled an order or whatever. So one became available, and that we just felt, let's grab it now, because who knows when we would get one, and we'll put it in the budget for next year. So that's why that amount of money stayed the
And
same.
what was the cost of the ambulance?
It was 200 something.
Okay.
I thought that, let me see, well, the increase here, if you look under ambulance over equipment, normally we put in 25,000 for that, and we increased it to 169,000. Now we're taking some money out of reserve to pay for the difference. We have money in reserve that we leave, and we try to set up so there's not big increases. Like last year was one of the times that air packs just like all of a sudden caught up on us. We had to.
And we've seen that with every fire department is, every few years we'll see a
Right.
large expenditure. And that's really, I guess, the question that I think most of the board has is for next year's budget. So we were in the ballpark of 875 for what is it, 2020, 2021.
Yep.
We've been in the 1.2 area for the last 2 years. Are we expecting that to go down back to like below $1 million for next year?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. With all the expenses going up, day-to-day expenses, fuel, it's really tough to say, but we try, the best we can, being all volunteer and doing what we're doing with our ambulance contracting out. We really, we've saved money than some other budgets. So yeah, anything we can do to get it down below that, of course, we're going to do that. Our budget is pretty much, what you see.
Yeah.
There's nothing hidden. Everything is out there. It is what it is in a way. We work hard on trying to maintain all that. It's tough. We don't want to, You know, a lot of times the mentality sometimes is, well, the town's paying for it. Well, you're all taxpayers too. And I don't want to raise anyone's taxes, let alone the villages and anyone in the town that we protect, you know, in Fremont or any of the areas that we, so I'm always conscious of that, and so is our board.
Bill,
Yes,
the ambulance is worth about 150, give or take.
okay. So that's for the ambulances. And then we have to outfit it with the lights.
Yeah, so that brings it up to about that 200.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Mhm.
So, these are the different, you know, shows you the tax rate. Anyone that lives outside our village, the village taxes paid for village residents, sure, part of the protection. And of course, anyone that's in the town that we cover, their tax bill, we will see the part of protection line. And that's what this. This is our equipment. You know, we try to keep it as long as we can. We're the home of green trucks, of course, green fire trucks. We're just gonna ask to be in the Syracuse parade, so I guess that's a good thing. We're all volunteers, like I said, and always paid service we have in the all is our 24/7, crew on all the time. Crew will stay overnight, they have your funk room. So there's one. Yeah, that's it. It's business. I mean, it's getting all that. Another day. So that's where we are. Did you had some of those slides that showed the percentages of calls? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mayor, can you ask me, or can I ask you a question? Can you remind me how long the waves contracts are for? Are they're
They're annual.
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I did, I'm sorry, I didn't know that.
Yeah, those are, so every year, and we have a clause in there at any time we could get out of it if we needed to.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's been working great since we started it many years ago. We just couldn't manage, it's like a leasing, I mean, you guys understand it, right?
Yeah.
So, this shows, you know, we've covered 33 square miles. The village of all, a large portion of the town is. And it shows you the calls from 21 last year and what we had so far from until August. And as you can see in the ambulance, that we're, you know, we're up there. We're 1,525 already. Last year, the total was 1,799. So, and that's because we're going all over. Being dragged all over the county. So even outside the county, we're in Madison County. Because we're so close to Bridgeport and Lakeport, we're way back out there too. That's another ambulance's district. So. Where it says 885 districts, mutual aid calls. I say 885
Oh,
districts.
in district,
Yeah.
885 in district, 640 mutual aid.
That's what you were saying, that you're spending a lot of time
Yeah.
outside of your own district.
But also in that number, you gotta realize, it's also, when you ask for that number, and I got looking at it the other day, we're not taking out what we do in the town. You know, like going to Fayetteville and Manlius.
You're counting that as a district?
Well, that's part of, no, are you counting that as a our fire district or the whole?
No, just your district.
Oh, our fire.
Yeah, so that's 640 mutual aid
So the
calls.
640 is then, it could be somewhere like in Fayetteville and Manlius too.
Yeah.
I mean, probably be a good idea to punch that number out.
Yeah.
All right,
Then
we
you
can do
can
that.
see how much we're helping Fayetteville and Manlius.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had that number.
Yeah, I've gotten more detail from you on where, but I can ask.
Yeah, we can see if we can get that in.
No, I mean, because that would tell
Because
you,
you guys are going back for.
yeah, we're covering each other all the time too, so. Yeah, so that number is a little misleading because 640 mutual aid could be from town of Sullivan or it could be right here in Fayetteville. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them were.
Good, thank you.
Slideshow, I'm good.
Any
Oh,
questions
great.
for Mayor Purcell? Thank you.
Oh, great. Questions?
Yeah, do we have anyone here to make public comment on the Manoa fire contract for 2023? Do we have anybody virtually joining us?
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate the help we had with your board and all of you. We all work really well together. And the two mayors from Fayetteville and Manlius, we meet once a month, and we meet once a month with you too. So they're always in contact, just so people know. I mean, it's tough to keep this all together and give the service that we all are doing. I think we have one of the best towns around, and our 3 fire companies plus Kirkville, it does a heck of a job with the resources we have. Great guys out there, every fire department. Does a great, fantastic job. So
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So, motion.
So, motion to approve the 2023 Manoa Fire Protection Contract in the amount of $1,241,693 is prepared by the attorney for the town and to authorize the supervisor to sign the contract.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I love the state, but we have a lot of meetings
Yeah,
ourselves.
no worries.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so next up, we have the continuation of the public hearing for the zone change, the Seven Pines project at 8104, 8108, 8112, and 8116 Manlius Casanova Road, and that's from CA and RA to RM. So it is open. I know we have a representative here from the applicant, if you'd like to come up to the podium. Sure. I think, really, some of the major concerns that we were hearing were around this being a more intensive use and that the parking situation. And so could you just address that? Allison, do you have the map to pull up?
Yes, we just need to-
Yeah, there's a plan layout that is submitted to the town.
Yep.
Yeah, I apologize, we weren't here last time.
Can you just state your name?
Yeah, sure. I'm Jim Niddle. I'm actually within Architects. I'm representing Shawshank Condos.
Probably need to move the podium a little closer to us.
Yeah,
but we're
sure.
just hearing better. Thank you so much. And for other folks. I'm sorry, I'm making you move furniture. Much appreciated.
Didn't
Thank
know
you.
I need to do that.
I know, sorry.
And I apologize. I'm an architect. I'm not a site planner. So I know there's some things I can answer and some things I can't answer tonight. But listening to the recording of the last meeting, I know some of the issues were concerning the intensity of use, parking, street access.
Could I ask you to speak up, please, sir?
I'll do the best I can. I'm not a loudspeaker to begin with. So let's first of all, it's an odd situation. It's existing buildings. They've been sitting very much underutilized for several years now. And with COVID pandemic, as we know, a lot of office space has been sitting empty and underutilized. So the applicant is had a great idea to take these buildings that are of a residential character already, and let's take a look at putting upper floors, putting some housing in there. So I think it's a great idea. The buildings lend themselves to this. The smaller buildings, they have stairs and a lift, and I think the 3 one-bedroom apartments kind of slip in there nicely. Okay, the larger building, we've restricted it to 4 for code reasons. We don't need additional stairs, exit, things of that nature. So I think it's a pretty good use. For what it's worth, building 3, the doctor has no intention of doing any housing in there at this point because the doctors that are in the building take a floor and a half, and then there's another 10 in there. So there's really no need to do that. So when all is said, we're talking about 13 bedrooms. Okay.
How many units was that?
That's 3, 6, 10.
Okay, so that's So look, we were looking at the RM, so the RM code that we currently have on the website is not, it doesn't look like it's updated since we passed the RM update. And the RM update changed the parking requirements and we made it so it was 2 spots per apartment, which is 20 spaces, given the proposal, and that's offsetting a reduction in commercial space.
Yeah.
Which I'm fairly certain the residential
so-
spots are
So.
less of a
I
requirement.
apologize, this is based on 1 per bedroom. Okay, so.
Yeah.
So if it's 2 per unit, 6, 12 and 14, so 26
Yeah.
parking spots. So it still effectively reduces the parking requirement there now. There's 93 spaces on the properties now. Currently, it's not compliant. Currently, we need 123 parking spaces, only 93. So with this, we get down just about to the 93 that are there now.
Yeah.
Okay, with the additional ones for, if we go 2 per unit, okay. And we understand that, you know, what we're trying to do here is get a zoning change. Obviously, there's some areas, variances and setbacks and things that we need to address as well. And then beyond that, the building permit process. We understand that there's certain code issues we have to address. That's just part of the process, but
Yeah.
we're not here to argue about the building permit process. We're really here talking about having a zone change. So as you know, the CA and the RA, the big concern would be that there's a sign out there now that's been advertising drive-through potential. Okay, nobody wants to see a drive-through. Nobody wants to see Dunkin' Donut or Chipotle. So what this would do is would restrict that. The RM uses, while still commercial, are much more neighborhood conducive businesses. So, and there's not, if somebody came in and re-subdivided this into a parcel and they picked up plot 1A, there is enough room there to develop something that we wouldn't want to see. I live in Manlius myself. I'm in Academy Hill, so this is a stone's throw for me as well. I have no desire to see a big development on that site either. Okay. With that, let me just open it up to any questions you might have.
Any questions from the board?
One of the issues that came up in the previous hearing, which may or may not be anything we can address, but was communication with the current tenants and the new owner.
Yeah, and I understand it, and Dr. Body has talked to Dr. Savikoff and others. And that's a business deal that I can't speak to. He has to address that, and they can work that out. But also, as I said, we're not doing anything with that building right now, so his parking can be controlled, and I think their issue is really to maintain their parking.
So I agree that that's not your place to get involved in. I think the issue I was trying to raise is that a mechanism for communicating with tenants when you have residential tenants will also need to be in place.
Yeah.
And that it would just make the neighbor, if we knew that if there was a trash problem or a parking problem or something, that there's going to be a responsive management, then it makes it much easier for the neighbors to
It
be.
definitely becomes a building management question.
So I just would say that would assist the neighbors in feeling comfortable if they knew somebody was properly staying on top of things.
Right, I think granite management is the property manager at the moment. So, and I assume that would stay on, just have to take on a different role with residents.
Thank you.
So, no more questions from the board?
No new ones.
Yeah. So if you'd like to take a seat, I'll
Yeah.
invite up more comments from the audience.
Thank you.
So someone like to come up and make a comment at the continuing public hearing?
Hello again, Roseanne Lorifus, Whetstone Road, the property right next to what's being proposed. You heard from us before, so I'm really not going to repeat anything. I think you know our concerns. I would like to leave you with 2 thoughts. First of all, I think I would like to thank you for being communicative with us and letting us express our opinions. The last thought I would like to leave you with is the fact that I don't think you need to zone all the buildings the same way. It came up before that what's closest to the residents whose property is right there is the RA designation. We really like that designation. We think it gives us protection from too much future development. And if you keep in mind the idea that you really don't have to zone all of those parcels the same way, I think that would be something to take into consideration. We've been there the longest, I think, in terms of when this was first proposed. And I really think that the RA designation then was giving us something that plus the berm for some protection. So, and also the parcel that's for sale, I really don't think you need to decide on that now either, but our opinions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Good evening, Trevor Atkins, 4674 Whetstone Road. Nice to see you all again. I apologize. I sent out another letter. It was a little bit later in the day. I hit everyone on the board and I did send it to the website. I have a copy of it if anybody would like a copy as I go through it.
I think we got it.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to it, but before that, the applicant's representative spoke about a couple of things. He talked about the lack of interest in office, right? So this property was being underutilized, but he just said that one of the buildings is fully occupied. We also heard 2 weeks ago from an existing tenant who talked about the fact that he won't renew his lease, right? So there's certainly some demand there as well. Additionally, and it's very important to point out that this gentleman purchased these properties as office units post-COVID, right? When the change to office demand had already occurred, he knew what he was buying, right? He bought it. Typically, commercial real estate is purchased on what they call a cap rate. Basically, you take what the net operating income, which is the total income less expenses like taxes or common area maintenance, and you have essentially your profit. And you take that profit and you multiply it by a percentage, and that's your rate of return. Like if you had a 5 or 6% mortgage on your house, this is the inverse of that, right? So if I'm putting up X amount of capital, I get the return. So he's done that, right? Now he's come in and he said, well, I found a way I could probably make more money because nothing has gotten worse for him. And it is troublesome that while he is coming to this board talking about apartments all on the second floor, and I totally recognize that this board is not intended to address site plan, right? So when you start talking about parking spaces and things of that nature, that's going to come with your planning board, and if you don't meet the zone requirements, then it's going to go to the zoning board of appeals, here's the VA, and then they're going to decide whether variances are appropriate or not. The problem here is this board has set out a certain number of things that an RM parcel must be, and you recently just modified that. One of the big things I want to point out is you folks said RM must have all of the parking in front of a building. I'm sorry, in the rear of the building. Meanwhile, 3 out of these 4 parcels have the parking in the front of the building, and the goal, right, is one. So yes, the transition area between residential and commercial, but it's not the only zone in your code that speaks to a transition between residential and commercial. There's an RA, and it actually has the exact same purpose, residential to commercial transition. I think historically, just looking at the master plan, I think historically the RA designation seems to do that, but I'm trying to speculate on history, and I'm not an engineer, I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a professional planner, who I would certainly like to hear from, right? When we start talking about this, and I know that you folks are going to get into you're going to get into the town's master plan, and there are folks who are professional planners. There are folks who are traffic engineers, and we've heard an architect talk about traffic. We've heard the board's attorney talk about traffic. But I got a Chick-fil-A approved in Hamburg, New York, right? Chick-fil-A. I mean, we're talking about one of the most intensive traffic uses out there. Right? We made a joke about it a couple of weeks ago. In that meeting, Chick-fil-A hired Bowler Engineering, one of the most reputable engineering firms in the entire country. When Bowler Engineering put this presentation together, Bowler Engineering did not, even though it was a senior engineer, he did not present on traffic. They called it a specific traffic professional, and that was a result of community members coming out and speaking about traffic concerns. We can talk about this being less intensive. And a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to harp on this, but a couple of weeks ago, we said, yeah, okay, traffic is going to be less potentially based on use. However, today, Saturday and Sunday, because it's all office use, there's zero traffic. So 100% of the residential traffic or anything else.
So just, we're talking about zoning, not current use.
Correct.
So if there was a commercial business that eventually purchased this property, maybe because they're not getting what we're hoping to get, that was open late, all within code in CA. So for perhaps a fast food place, we would not have the ability to restrict them from opening up that. That would happen at the planning board, similar to whatever development is going to happen if it were to change to RM.
Right. I totally understand that, except that we're skipping a step. So now we're assuming that this applicant is going to demolish these buildings, right? So we're getting way out in the future. And
I'm not talking about usage, I'm talking about the zoning, and currently it is zoned such that a drive-through could open up in these locations. And they're asking for something that a drive-through couldn't open up.
Except that practically speaking, those parcels we talked about a couple weeks ago, they couldn't use the access way that currently connects to 92. So in order to get access to 92, to get in the curb cut, you have to apply for a major access permit to 92. Because 92, I believe it's a state road. So you've got to go to New York State DOT and get, and then that curb cut would only be approved, would be specifically for that parcel or potentially shared by the CA parcels. That would take up your ability to have lot coverage, right? So you'd lose lot coverage. You'd still have to meet the setback requirements of front yard, setback, side yard. And our code says that each individual parcel needs to meet its own parking requirements, its own setback. So you can't, this is not, as much as we can just say, oh, we're just changing CA and RA, this is not a center. These are individual parcels. And to Roseanne's point, they could be zoned separately, right? We could say RA isn't going to change, right? Because we can all agree that RA, based on the code, right, it certainly can't be a drive-through, and it can't be any of these intensive uses. It can't be retail. So changing that is particularly egregious. But the other parcels themselves, just practically speaking, when they have to meet, and so something else we talked about a little bit, the CA zone says that parking needs to be per use. Okay, the RM zone says that it's just 1 per 200, or, and I apologize in my letter, I didn't pick up on it was 2 per unit as opposed to 2 per bedroom. But practically speaking, these parcels, to meet the code, you're not going to be able to put anything with a drive-through. They're not big enough. And to meet the code. Now, if they go to the ZBA, right? We're not talking about zoning, but if they go to the ZBA, that's fine. But the public is going to speak out, right? Speaking of which, and I don't mean this to sound as negative as it's going to, folks, but we had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and you had half a dozen or more members of this community speak out against this. You had an existing tenant speak out against this. You had more than 24 members of this community present for the public hearing. All of them, everybody who spoke out in opposition. Not one member of this community spoke out in support of this application. And when I present, right, and I told you I've done this before, when I present, if there's one single voice of opposition, I'm scared. I'm scared. The majority of the time, when boards hear community members with legitimate concerns, community members who lived for 40 years, some have lived for 7, some have lived for 20, some have just moved in a month or 2 ago. They react to that, right? And I'm not saying that you folks aren't, but the fact that we're still here today talking about it does create some concern. Something else that created a little bit of concern. I went back a couple, so what I noticed was there at some point there was probably a presentation, right? And because we got the public notice only for the public hearing, we didn't have the benefit of the presentation. I would have liked that. So just maybe a general comment, I could have gone back to the beginning of the meeting. If that public notice could come out in advance of the applicant's presentation, so it can't. Okay, so
it is available.
The presentation's
online.
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
I understand. So going back and looking at what I did notice was a couple, so not the 12th, the meeting prior to that, the board, I believe that they voted to have the public hearing on the 12th. And they also made a comment that the planning board had actually supported this application.
Yes, they recommended to the zone.
Right, and then they And then they also wanted a rezone of a parcel that was not applied for. Your attorney advising not to do that, which I understand. But the problem with that is, the planning board really should have looked at the fact that you're rezoning these existing buildings and this existing infrastructure into non-compliance. So when they go in and they say, hey, we want to reuse this existing structure, you're not going to tell them, you're practically speaking, you're not going to say, lop off half that building so that you can meet the parking code for what you want. It's going to be a lot easier for that person to gain that variance. The likelihood of reusing those lower level facilities for retail versus somebody knocking that down and reconstructing a drive-through or retail or something more intensive is far less likely, right? Just practically speaking, as a resident who is fully aware, as I mentioned last time, I share the largest property line, right, of anybody here with this. The building 3B, which isn't going to have residential in it, when you zone it to RM and every other residential classification in this town requires a 40-foot rear yard setback, right, from residence to somebody else's backyard. That's my backyard. Today, that building is at 30 feet. So is somebody going to grant that 10-foot variance? Or does this board say today, this property does not and cannot comply with the RM zone? And I'm not gonna rezone it that.
It doesn't comply with the RA zone either.
It does comply with the CA, right? So all residential where people live are there at night, in the evening, right?
But that building behind you does not comply with it where it currently is.
I think
It's already out of compliance.
I apologize. I thought the CA zone had a 30-foot.
Right, but
Rear yard
the
setback.
building you're talking about is in the RA.
There's no, I don't think there's any.
There's no setbacks for CA.
There's no setback.
It's
There's no, okay, so there's no setback from CA. But now we're going to zone it into non-compliance, non-conformity.
We would zone
Already
it
in that.
into a zone with setbacks to further,
That wouldn't comply.
Protect you.
that won't comply with the current use.
Right.
However, that current use is there, that building is there. So we would be providing, the RM zone would provide further assurance that if the buildings were redeveloped, if the site was redeveloped, that the new building would have to be set back.
But you're gonna allow it to operate in non-compliance.
It's already
right
doing it.
now.
Well, it's in compliance with the CA.
No, it's not.
No, it's.
Oh, I thought-
It's an RM. It's not compliant.
It's
We're talking about the RA's parcels.
This is a CA parcel. You mind?
The parcel behind you is RA.
So you see this pie shape there? That's me. This parcel, 3B. And the yellow is CA. This is the 30 feet.
And what we're saying is that currently,
Oh,
that's
okay.
within,
No, see, that's the second one. You're talking about the middle one.
Yes, ma'am.
yeah, but
That's CA.
But RM, so basically what we're saying is it wouldn't be in compliance, but it would be then saying the current intensive use that it's in allowed for it to be there. And then we would be changing it so that there is a less intensive use.
But you're not gonna move. the
With-
building 10 feet.
But if the site was redeveloped,
Supervisor here, with all respect, we can't guarantee that it's going to be less intense than office. Right? We don't know that it's going to be less intense than, or sorry, more or less intense than it's now.
Residential is less intense than commercial.
What's that?
Residential is less intense than commercial.
But that's not all, it's just residential mixed use.
well, I
Just
guess,
because you're calling.
I guess
it
what
RM
I'll
doesn't
say
mean that
is,
they're
my
residential.
fear is that if we say no to this zone change, we now have a very large set of commercial parcels that may no longer be attractive to the current owner and could be bought and sold and could be redeveloped in whatever way. And in my eye, the option is you make it a less intensive use that has more setbacks so that nothing currently changes. But if it is redeveloped in the future, the residents have more protections through the planning board to make sure that whatever is redeveloped there is much less intense than what could be there in CA. Whereas right now, if we do nothing, it still leaves us open to a drive-through coming in, trying to propose a drive-through. The RM would leave everything as it is right now and then protect against future development. Whereas the CA would not change anything, which is currently out of compliance, but then not provide any future protections to the residents.
The RA is out of compliance.
The RA is out of compliance. And the RA parcel, that's another conversation. In particular,
This isn't a complicated concept.
No.
These are two CA properties that can be used for much more intense use than they're being used today, period. And the issue is, What happens if the owner of that property decides he can't make enough money as office space and tears them down and builds a McDonald's there? That's the issue that the board is trying to. They're struggling with.
So when we originally saw this, that's why we had the conversation about RM and realized that, you know, this would be something that would provide residents future protection because it would update the zone to be a less intensive use with more setbacks.
That's not right now in the town of Manlius, that is not an appropriately zoned CA property. It doesn't fit within any plan for the uses that are allowed in CA.
Understood. But it is pre-existing, non-conforming in this case, and you've got the immediate residents.
I don't know that it's pre-existing.
But we also have an
non-conforming.
applicant who wants us to look at the zoning, so it's an opportunity to change it.
Sure.
So, which we don't always get and we don't ask for.
And that's,
you know?
and even leaving the RA parcel aside, because if they don't intend to change the use,
Yeah,
I mean, wouldn't allow for residential.
we could just change it.
But we could look at changing the CA to provide that protection in the future and maybe take a little longer to understand the RA parcel that it's out of compliance.
Yeah.
So when we talk about intensity and the ease of the future redevelopment of it, right? The way the CA is designed, each individual use market, this is getting the plan, but we seem to be doing that anyway, right? When you start to dig into that, the CA requires parking per use, not per code, right? So retail in a CA zone requires 1 parking space per 100 square feet of space. Whereas your RM code requires 1 per 200
So we
as a
changed, we
blanket.
just updated that and our RM code now refers back to our parking code. So now it's all.
It's consistent with CA.
consistent. So it's safe. We fixed it.
So now it's per use.
So our RM code now refers to our parking section in our code. And so that way it applies.
Per use, yeah.
So what was presented, the meeting prior to the 12th, I'm sorry, I don't have the date, but what was presented talks about a 1 per 200 parking space for all uses that are non-residential. If that's a change you're referring to, now, if something happened between. that
Well,
meeting
and then we
this-
change the RM zone to
There's.
adjust the parking requirement.
It's like different uses,
Do you know when
does
that will be?
300 square feet.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
so
just we're waiting.
Is it on the-
Might want to let them know that it's urgent.
We send it to them and they update it when their codifiers. have-
So I don't want you to perseverate on a code that may not exist, so
Okay, no, of course.
I just want you to be aware that.
But
It
then.
is online though.
Yeah, no, so the RM zone has equivalent parking requirements to CA outside of except for residential. Residential, it's right in there,
It's
2 spots per unit.
per unit.
It's two spots per apartment house. opposed to-
Per apartment,
So
right.
that was it, right?
Okay,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I want to make sure other people have chances.
Or would anybody like an opportunity?
We talked about it in some board.
Yeah.
Or.
Yeah.
For a
We close the
second.
public hearing.
Oh, you mean. to-
Well, you can talk about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should
Tell you what's up.
yeah, we can talk about what's open.
Alright.
So I just want to point out, was that how you're saying you want to keep it RA? RA also does allow for R1, just as RM does. So RA, keeping it that way, would allow him to do the same thing for R and RM as well. For that part of it. And CA
Maximum would-
also allows for R3, which is also a more intense usage as well.
Because you can live in our RA.
The maximum, so it's a maximum of 2 units there.
So it's more intense usage of housing or for hospitals or hospices and things like that, and even kennels and.
I've got the RA and the RM in front of me. And looking at what is allowed and what isn't allowed. We just felt that RA was better protection.
Which, and I think
Yeah.
we can come to a pretty solid conclusion that the RA, I will tell you, one of the deputy clerks and I have been digging for plans and anything we can find about that one parcel. Because that's the one that strikes us as the oddest. It's already weird enough that it's in CA, but the fact that that parcel is multi-zone with RA and CA, and I think there's something else in there as
Must
well.
have been some plans on something.
Yeah,
What's
and then-
interesting too is that it's RA, but it's the largest building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if
There's something
we,
going on there.
I think the correct thing to do is for the board to discuss this now as not including that RA parcel, because that will be something we will have to.
Okay, can we, I just want to look at it too. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Here, I can share my screen.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
So we're talking about making a decision, not including, not
Possibly.
rezoning, yeah.
And then having to look as to if that building can be in compliance with RA, although we don't think it can at all. And then if so, making some change to bring it into compliance.
So I want to point out, just like we're talking about that 4B parcel not making sense today, when people look back on these buildings, because they're probably not going to get knocked down, right? So we just paid a lot of money for those buildings. They're probably not going to, they're going to look at this and they're going to say, the setbacks aren't met, the road front isn't met for RM, and I totally respect that. A lot of it is non-conforming today. But today, an applicant has been having a very difficult time in front of other boards changing the use, again, because of the access, and because of that. But take 4B, for instance. You, the folks, when you redid the RM code, you went from a 35% lot coverage, which includes all asphalt and building, anything you're doing, right? You went from 35 to 50, which is greatly increased. However, 4B has far more lot coverage than 50%. I don't know the percentage, nobody presented it to us, right? Just some of my angst here is that the presentation doesn't show all of the deficiencies. It just, this parcel, you go through it, right? You don't meet a front yard setback for 4B, right? I get that it doesn't meet that today, but that was based on a very specific approval 30, 40 years ago, right? Things are changing now. So you get a chance to look at everything and to say, okay, well, we're going to make this potentially worse, potentially better because of something that may or may not happen in the future, makes me a little bit nervous. I promise you, I'm not uneducated on the subject. You may think that I am, but as a resident who shares the biggest property line with us, I'm here asking you not to do this. And it's not because I'm uneducated or I don't understand the principles in front of us today. I'm telling you, based on my experience, what developers can do. Once you change, if we want to talk to the applicant about going to the ZBA and talking about adding residential, now I had a standing concern with adding residential, because when you add residential, you add expenses, right? School, EMS, all those things. These people live here year round, versus the office space, which creates jobs. And yeah, maybe the office market's a little bit soft now, although again, not renewing the tenant who wants to renew is concerning. I'm not really sure what the facts lie there, but getting rid of job opportunities in exchange for additional residents without any, I don't know if anybody spoke to the tax assessor, but I don't believe there'd be any significant increase to the tax base while putting additional residents. And just because they're saying we'll put residents on the second floor, doesn't mean they can't come back and put them on the first floor. And you folks are giving up your power to the planning board or the ZBA.
So you wouldn't want to see that turn all residential?
No, absolutely not. So one of the things we talk about with traffic too is, again, it's the Saturdays and Sundays, but if you're going to your doctor's office, if you're going to, right, so Village of Manlius is going to put it into Starbucks, right, where the car dealer was, as well as a well not, right? So you could get nervous about Starbucks creating a great deal of traffic. The catch is, those folks, like me, leaving Whetstone Road and going to work in my office in Liverpool, I'm driving by, I'm jumping off the road to get another cup of coffee. That is not another car on the road, right? Yes, maybe I'm coming out of that, and there's a traffic signal, I'm slowing folks down slightly, but that is not what they call new trip generation, right? When you put residents in, every time that those residents go to Stingers for pizza, go to Pavone's for pizza, go to Ironwood, all you want for pizza, or those are all new trips from all new residents, all new trip generation. Again, without increasing the tax base for those roadways or anything else. Now, there's another application on, I promise I'll stop, but there is another application on who's going to take a property that's no longer on, it's not currently on the rent rolls or the tax rolls, and they're going to spend significant dollars, activate that and put it on the tax rolls. That's going to benefit the school system. I don't know if it's going to bring my taxes down, but at least he's covering some of, if not all of their costs. And I can appreciate that. But here, right, we're creating essentially an additional red number, or at least the potential. They're not always going to be, they're all going to be school students, but there's certainly a potential to, you can't tell them that maybe, right? I know that when, and again, it's the Village of Manlius, but when the O'Brien and Gear plant, which is the Hannaford, right, they initially applied for a mixed use. Village. Yeah. They applied for mixed use. They wanted to put in a large number of residential. That was originally rejected because the school system couldn't support the additional students.
No, that's, I mean,
This is 10
arguably, not really.
This is 10 apartments. 10 apartments, so we're
Yeah.
not comparable.
I mean, I think.
But I'd rather save the 10 apartments. I'd rather save the 10 apartments.
So
We understand what you would want. And we're hearing all of
Yeah.
that. It's ultimately the board's decision based on their listening to the public, listening to the applicant, and making their decision in terms of what, I think you've done an adequate job explaining your position. I think everybody understands your position. And I think that other people should be given a chance to speak if they want to.
So would anyone else like to make a comment on this?
Definitely don't think that.
No, no.
You're very educated with this. You definitely did your homework with it. You guys really, you really wanted to say a commercial A with the possibility of opening up a commercial storage place or landing fields or land or used car repair shops and used car dealers, with those options, rather than seeing office space with apartments on top. Unless.
We think practically speaking, especially with the inclusion of the RA parcel, we don't believe that it's likely to become those things.
It's a gamble then. That's your
So
gamble.
you're just placing your faith in the owner that if we don't get in the zone change, he's just gonna leave it as is.
The understanding of your code, your requirements in the code and the lot sizes, that's what I'm thinking, yeah, but it is the understanding. Now, the two parcels that are, it's building 2B.
Well, I want to listen to what's here. That's
2B
what I'm
and
gonna do.
3A maybe, on the far side, that are adjacent to the large residential complex, right? They have no rear yard neighbor, right? That's the river, that's Chris Halliday's property, abuts the back of that, but there's nothing there, right? So if we're talking about traffic concerns of things of that nature, we have mechanisms to call that to the site, right? But primarily, it's gonna be New York State DOT. And when we have traffic professionals come in and we can talk about that, you still have the right, your planning board and your zoning board still have the right to protect this community.
So,
Thank you.
if everyone's good, I'd like to close the public hearing.
I'll second that.
But like make a motion to close the public
I'll
hearing.
second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries.
And then I think what I've heard is that potentially we are interested in keeping RA as RA, but changing the CA to RN. So, but I do think that there is concerns about when we sent this to the Onondaga County Planning Board, they raised some concerns that some parking spaces and signage is in the state right away. And so some of those concerns potentially need to be addressed. And then also the questions about access, using the different accesses to different parcels. And so there's still some questions that we do need to look into to figure out how to move forward. So with that, I think we need to
I'd be comfortable to move on.
for now, and we will address this.
And what we'll likely have to do is we'll speak with the applicant and his team, and then we'll reach out to the, as we learn things, we'll reach out to the folks that have sent us emails, and we'll kind of keep that.
That was the
open
other
communication.
concern too, was making sure that the berms were sufficient.
Okay, so berms, the getting in and out, the signage.
Yeah, there's a
based
lot,
on that.
there's a lot of
So
stuff.
those are the concerns, and if we can address those, then I think we're pretty bad.
Okay,
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you. Okay, next up, we have a presentation on the zone change request for 4600 Enders Road, tax map number 117.2-01 -04.0, requested amended to from CA to RM. And I believe we have the applicant
Yep,
here.
I just promoted it.
Fantastic.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good evening.
Great. I'm not sure whether to be happy or nervous to go following that one. Let's go. So again, my name is Grazi Zazara. I'm the president of Icon Companies, a commercial real estate development firm here in Syracuse. Last time we all talked, I introduced that we have 4600 Enders Road under contract to purchase. We haven't purchased it yet. We were studying it, trying to determine the best potential future use for the property to bring it back to a utilized asset and part of the community. At this time, we feel the best use for it would be mixed use, real light office use with the balance being apartments. So we formally amended the application to RM and hope for your consideration in doing so. And I know if approved, we'd still have to go through the process of, presenting to the town what we plan to do, what it would look like, go through the whole entire process. But I do know that it would all be within the existing walls of the current property. There wouldn't be any major changes to the exterior. And there's a ton of parking there. I think historically there has been a lot of use there, and this would be much lighter than historic or probably what's currently required. But so that's where we're at with the property. We'd love to do something with it, put it back on the tax roll, but it's got to make sense for us and for the community. So I appreciate your consideration and happy to hear some feedback.
So I know, when we were looking at the RM zone that we had put together, that was something that the applicant was interested in. Just to kind of catch a bit of speed, it's an empty building, the church, and they're hoping to revitalize it and, bring it back in. It's adjacent to residential. So reducing the usage from CA to RM does.
It's also commercial right there too, though.
It's commercial and it's residential.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really does
That's like perfect. for
reduce
transition. Yeah.
intensity in
It's
that.
transition,
area.
it's a perfect transition.
Yeah, and again, to reuse a piece of property that, no longer is in use and make it useful again. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I think one of the questions has to do with the parking. There's probably, as you mentioned, there's a lot of parking there that may not really be needed in the use that you plan for. And it is, it's not exactly in front of it, it's beside the building. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about reconfiguring, possibly decommissioning some of that parking or other, in terms of just having a little less asphalt in the area.
Yeah, we recently did a project in Casanova where the same thing came up. It was a large parking lot, former office building, and we did cut back about half the parking and turned it into green space. But, each project's different. So for this one, we have not spent a lot of time and resources with the fine details of the project because we don't even know if the use would be permitted. But should the zoning be changed and that use be permitted, we're going to get right to work with our architect and get some good plans in place and come back and present them to you.
Actually not my job, that's a site plan issue, but I just wanted to bring it up, so, because that is sort of the downside of that particular site, in terms of.
Sure.
The other thing, which is, so in general, you would be envisioning access off of Vendors Road with some kind of shopping entry type way into the retail on the lower level?
I think we would be looking at, there's some office space that's close to move-in ready of about 2,200 square feet. And we would probably do the balance of apartments. Luckily all three sides of the property are at grade. So they each have their own entrance that are, handicap accessible and convenient. So other than the 2,200 feet of office, we probably would look to go apartments. I don't know how many that is, whether it's 12 or 15, I'm not sure. But once we get some drawings done, we'll have a better idea.
Okay, thank you.
So any other questions? Because we can.
Is there an elevator in the building?
There's not, but again, every side of the property is at grade, all three sides of ingress and egress. So there's not really a need for an elevator.
Okay.
So we would be looking to make a referral to the planning board.
No. I'll make a motion to refer the zone change request for the parcel located at 4600 Enders Road to change the zoning from commercial A to residential mixed use to the town planning board and Onondaga County Planning Board.
I'll second. I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
So once we hear back from the planning board, we'll get a sense of where they're at. We'll be looking for the recommendation. We'll schedule a public hearing and we'll keep things moving forward.
Great. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so next up, we have an update on the comprehensive plan from Keith Ewald from Barton and Lejudas. And we are going to be suggesting to everybody to take the comprehensive plan survey, which there's a link in the agenda and all over our website.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Thanks for having me, members of the board, folks in the audience. Mr. Proteski, how you doing?
How are you?
Good. I was asked to drop in tonight to I guess just give the board an update on kind of where we are with the comprehensive plan, answer any questions you guys may have. I thought just to kind of roll through quickly and orient everybody, I would just kind of quickly roll through a little slide deck here. Can everybody see the PowerPoint here?
Yes.
Okay. So I believe I've met everybody at this point in time on the board. My name is Keith Ewald from Barton LaJudas. My colleague and I, Grace DeSantis and myself, have been spearheading working with Sarah and Heather and many of your colleagues and neighbors in the Manlius community to advance your first comprehensive plan. I'm not going to go into the details of what makes a plan and the benefits and all that. I think everybody is aware of the comprehensive plan tenets and the benefits of it all. I will say that the town has done a nice job at seeking additional funding opportunities and kind of co-implementing this plan with a climate smart plan that the Central New York Regional Planning Board is also preparing for the town. So as part of that, and to integrate components of each of the plan, each of the comprehensive plan and the climate smart plan, so they're aligned with each other, not really for redundancy purposes, but just to make sure that certain actions and strategies are aligned and mutually beneficial to each plan. So part of that that was funded from that program that's being built into the comprehensive plan, which is important to note for those that maybe are not aware, are things like a zoning assessment. We would typically, as part of a comprehensive plan, go through a municipality zoning code to identify just high level deficiencies, gaps, best practices that maybe the zoning codes are devoid of. The unique, I guess, process about this is not only are we doing a zoning assessment that's a little more in depth, but also preparing that in conjunction with a build out analysis, which is important to note, specifically based on some of the conversations we're having here this evening. Trying to identify where certain zone changes should be recommended based on impacts of particular build out. So what we would typically do as part of a build out analysis is identify, prime property that is either in the process of being redeveloped or could potentially be redeveloped based on any number of factors. And then looking at the permitted uses within those districts of those properties. And then running certain scenarios on, again, worst case scenario based on permitted uses. What does that generate in terms of traffic and trip generation onto existing corridors? What does that do for level of service to those corridors? And then based on the findings of that type of build out analysis is where we would tend to go back and make certain zoning recommendations, all very unique to individual parcels and zoning districts in different parts of the town. So an interesting component of this particular plan, it doesn't always go into comprehensive plans, but again, because of the funding resources that the town has been able to obtain with the different state programs, it's a cool part of this plan. Again, at the end of this process, we'll be sort of working with the Central New York Regional Planning Board to align the strategies and recommendations that ultimately can be integrated into the climate action plan. So those are some of the unique things about this plan, and we're currently working on those components as we speak. Just a little project timeline here. We got started, I would say, probably a little over a year ago, Sarah. And we've done a lot of good work. Sarah and Heather have spearheaded quite a bit of community outreach in the form of focus groups and things like that, community meetings, committee meetings. As you can see here, we're in that zoning assessment and build out analysis component of the planning process. And then from here, things move pretty quickly. So as we're doing some of the behind the scenes technical work, Sarah and her team have been out in the community, again, expanding the outreach, trying to engage folks and bring awareness to the plan. And they've done a very nice job at that. Ultimately, where we want to be by the end of 2022 is a draft plan report. And then at that point, we're going to be, again, rolling a lot of this out into the public, looking for feedback through various open houses and such. Sarah, we discussed this morning, I believe our next committee meeting is going to be on the heels of the zoning assessment and build out analysis, where we'll present some of those findings. And I think we're targeting early December for that.
December, yeah.
Yeah, and then again, on the heels of that committee meeting, we'll be in a pretty solid position to formulate a draft plan document, which will be kind of a presentation of all the public outreach to date, all the technical work we've done, and series of sort of public infrastructure development policy recommendations that will be built into the plan. And then from that point, probably into early 2023 is when we'll be doing a lot of the coordination with the Central New York Regional Planning Board and making sure the implementation strategies and recommendations are, again, mutually beneficial to both plans and integrated into each.
Can you
Just,
just
I thought
go
this-
back for
I'm
one?
sorry?
I just had a question on that slide. I was wondering what is the community development strategy?
So, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, the community development strategy is really kind of the framework for, again, the goal. It's kind of the outline of the goals, objectives, the strategies, and it's really kind of your development framework that will inform your implementation plan. Well, it's a collection of your objectives and action strategies.
Like what the bullet points and the posters are right now.
Yes. Yeah. That's kind of the start of it. Yeah. And then again, all that gets rolled up into an implementation plan where we identify, key stakeholders, funding opportunities, leads for each of those action strategies, and a timeline for those and cost. So I wanted to include this slide again because I think it speaks to a lot of the hard work that Sarah and Heather have been doing and other folks on the committee with the outreach in the community over the last year. In addition to workshops, committee meetings, open houses and such, there's been a lot of focus groups that have been held, which have been very important and instrumental into informing not only the high level goals and objectives of the plan, but it starts to kind of trickle down into some of these, specific action strategies and projects that we want to identify moving forward. So this is quite an extensive list here, and I would say it's pretty unique to Manlius. We tend to not have this much outreach in a lot of our comprehensive plans around upstate New York. So, again, this is just more of what I was just saying, basically by the end of 2022, we're going to be in a good position to have a draft of the plan to start reviewing with the community and the committee. And then ultimately into winter and spring of 2023, we'll be working to finalize the plan and go through the actions to do so. And that's kind of pretty much it.
We're going to be reaching out to independent and local businesses, and we are going to be reaching out to leaders in arts and culture before we wrap up outreach. And we're really going to shoot for the last large push for participation for the survey. We're going to be asking local businesses to donate small amount gift cards to be, and when you enter the survey, you'll be eligible to be drawn your name out for those. And so the chamber, which I think is being renamed now the Onondaga East Chamber, we're hoping to work closely with them on that. And for the purpose of anyone listening, if you care about the arts, we want to hear from you. So get in touch. Thank you. Thanks, Keith. Questions?
Thank you for the update.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very much, Keith.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure, guys.
We are looking for a cool card.
Yes.
Don't we have to sign an agreement with them too?
They're good. We don't have.
No.
They
They're a
do their
separate
own,
district.
yeah. So they assess their own.
We just collect it.
All right, so just a quick rundown of Kirkville Fire District. They are a district.
District.
That's right.
So
They're
they
special
run,
district.
so they elect their own fire chief, commissioner, or board, and they run their own budget, but, just to include them in here, because of course, they're a big part of
One part of the
Manlius,
town.
yeah, big part of them. So this is them, of the calls, they are a volunteer fire company, and they only provide fire service. And then they just have some.
Why did you freeze?
Why did that freeze up there? Oh, there we go. So this is on a link to the agenda, and so this is their budget that was already approved. Also, they do this great program where you can get your address number. Because it's super important to have your address number visible so they can find you. So check out their website for that. And then this is just, again, just showing the budget. in comparison to the other.
And they don't run the ambulance service, so we'll sell it.
The rates. This is their apparatuses. And their website's kirkvillefire.com. So if you want to volunteer, check it out. And that's it.
They also put on an amazing pancake breakfast.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I
Which
just
is
put that on.
Sunday. Yes, which is Sunday,
Oh,
October
wow.
30th.
Okay, what time?
Almost in the morning.
Okay. At the fire department.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they came in 92%.
Who wants to make a motion?
Oh, we don't need to make.
Oh, we don't have to. This is just for information.
Just a little report.
Oh, cool, thank you.
Great, so next up, we have the CNY Stormwater Coalition Staff Services and Education.
So I would like to make a motion to enter into a contract with the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board for the CNY Stormwater Coalition Staff Services and Education Compliance Assistance Program, which is required for our NS4, at a rate of $3,600 annually, as outlined in the resolution as presented.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And that's a pretty standard one we do every year, as you said, for the MS4 purposes. So then next up, we have the preliminary budget. We need to adopt that. We were able to get together for this meeting. So I would just be looking for a motion. One thing I will say for the audience and for those in virtual attendance now or later, I know Councilor Denton is working on some slides that'll help really understand what that budget looks like, what the changes were, between the tentative or between previous years and this preliminary budget. And that's where we're going to be asking folks to take a look, dive in, and to prepare for the next agenda item, which would be the public hearing on the preliminary budget. But as for right now,
So I would like to make a motion to adopt the 2023 preliminary budget as presented, with thanks to town manager Hoot and our accountant and other staff for helping to put that together.
second. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next up,
So now we need a motion to set the date for the 2023 preliminary budget public hearing on November 9th at approximately 6:05 p.m.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So just to kind of close the loop on that, we did schedule a special meeting for November 9th for the particular reason of having this public hearing. And we'll be going through the presentation there at the beginning of that public hearing to just bring everybody in the room up to speed. So we'd look to see plenty of people here on November 9th.
And all the details for the public, for the preliminary budget will be on our website, and you can find that under government and then town budget, and it will be on there tomorrow.
Great, thank you. So then we have a Sustainable Manlius Committee update. Allison, could you share the poster? That's right on the agenda.
Yep. Move a second.
Well, so this is the, as teachers refer to, the climate action plan. Part of doing that is doing a survey. I know Sustainable Manly has put the survey together. I will say we are launching 2 surveys at the same time, so we are trying to make sure that everybody knows about the 2 that are out there. So that QR code does work. You can also find it through the website. And basically, we're just looking for folks to take this survey to give us the feedback as we begin that climate action plan. And, you know, start moving forward with that with the comprehensive plan.
And to find that poster on our website, go to our website under government, under committees, the state of Manlius.
And maybe we'll do a town news.
Oh, is it on the homepage?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. it should
Yeah,
be
that's
all
even
over
better.
the carousel there. Great. Okay. Next up, just a work session update. We have been doing work sessions at the, prior to our first meeting of the month. Given that we had 4 meetings in a row, we're gonna waive doing a November work session. If we think of a topic for December, we will, you know, if we think of something that we want to dive into a little bit more, we'll announce that at a future meeting. But as far as November, we will be skipping the work sessions we've been doing. Next up, I have my supervisor's report.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the supervisor's report for September 2022.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's like 2 sets of minutes and an abstract.
Okay, so I would like to thank Weber for the minutes of 9/28 and support approving those minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the 10/12 meeting.
And I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Abstract number 20.
Abstract number 20, I'd like to make a motion to approve abstract number 20 in the amount of $351,301.91. There's nothing special.
Second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. So does anybody have anything else that we may have missed, didn't make it onto the agenda? Okay.
Nothing.
We don't need to go into executive session for anything.
Not unless you really want to.
No.
I look for a motion to
So I'll
adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you for coming.